Welcome. Thank you for joining us. We are in the midst of our series called The World at the End of Your Driveway, which is a lot about being on mission and evangelism and things like that. And hopefully the idea in this series is rethinking some of the thoughts that I think traditionally evangelicals have, put around the idea of mission and evangelism. But why don't you share kind of maybe just a little better overview of what the series is about than I just gave?
Sure. One is we want to obey Jesus when he commanded us to go into the world and preach the gospel and make disciples and baptize them and teach them. And so that's Jesus' mission, to save the world. We want to participate with him in that. But I think, as you said, we kind of got stuck in a mode as evangelicals or as people of faith who want to share our faith. And I think we have to maybe rethink some of those things these days because, again, Jesus said the greatest commandment was to love our neighbor as ourselves, which was equal to loving God. Yep. And so we sometimes say we prove our love for God by loving our neighbors. Yep. And so I think we're really focusing on the love your neighbor part because I think in the past we've kind of brought it back to the church as an institution, invite people to church, hear a presentation or see a presentation, and then respond to some sort of invitation, where I think it takes it out of the hands of everyday ordinary people. Yeah. And we're trying to give them or give people just tools and methods and ideas about how to share the gospel with your family, your friends, your coworkers, and your neighbors in a way that isn't offensive.
Yeah, and I do think it's really interesting. Like even when I've read a little bit, they talk about, say, breakdowns from, like, say, the Billy Graham way of kind of doing it, and so many often things the thing that they don't really talk about, or at least as strongly they talk about, like, bring the people to the thing, is how they get there is usually through some sort of relationship and friendship. And so a lot of this is saying, like, what if that's the key? Yeah. And a lot of the people, when they're breaking that down, saying that was the key.
Yeah, exactly.
And this is just being more intentional to say, like, no, the key is relationship and being relational with our neighbors. And one of the things we've talked about with that is just being present with our neighbors and how to do that. Yeah. And so, and this is going to lead us into sort of what we're talking about today. And I really like what Sam Chan has to kind of present in this idea of how we could be present with our neighbors. And he talks about this in the book, How to Talk About Jesus Without Being That Guy. Yep. And he likens it to being a chaplain.
So tell me, that's a very sort of churchy word, and we've heard it. I mean, there's chaplains on a police force and those kind of things. But what exactly is a chaplain, and how do I be one?
Well, one is chaplain is someone who brings care, and very particularly spiritual
care. Yeah.
And they're often they're in the military, they're in hospitals, they're in schools, and like we have them. I know we recently sat down with an individual who does that at the University of Calgary. Yeah. But we can do that kind of in our neighborhoods. We can bring a sense of care. Okay. And there are certain kind of characteristics that can come with being a chaplain, and we're going to kind of just maybe take that break those down, how that looks. Like, it's one thing to be, how do we bring care, but here's just some things that can look like. And just so we know, it doesn't mean we necessarily are in all sort of every opportunity are going to do all of these at once, though we might. But these are just some of the characteristics. Okay, we're chaplain, great, I hear that. Okay, bringing care, bringing spiritual care. Okay, what does that look like on a little bit more broken down level?
Different aspects of the job kind of thing.
And so we are just gonna basically use the breakdown that Sam Chan uses in the book, How to Talk About Jesus Without Sounding Like That.
Such a great title.
All right, well, we're gonna start off with one thing, is the idea of wisdom, and just sharing wisdom.
So that's just being, sometimes it can just be advice. Yep. Or maybe offering a different perspective. Yep. I had an opportunity just yesterday to do that, offer a different perspective. Someone had emailed me about a particular issue they were concerned about, and I responded. I didn't have an answer to the problem, but I did offer a slightly different perspective, and the answer I got back from the person was that it was helpful to them. Yeah. So I think those are ideas. I mean, I did pray about how I should respond, and I did ask for wisdom. And it says in the book of James, if you ask for wisdom, God will give you some. And so I think that in that particular case, if I had tried to give an answer, it wouldn't have been received as well. But just offering a slightly different perspective, I think that gave the person some hope.
Yeah, and I think that it's really important that when we talk about wisdom, we're not talking about trying to give the right. Or wrong answer, or just true or false, even though it can encompass that.
Yep.
It is a lot about what's maybe appropriate, relevant, applicable to the given situation or circumstance.
Yeah.
The good news of God's wisdom is available through all of us, to all of us. As you just sort of mentioned with James, we're supposed to ask, and he's apparently got lots to give.
Yep.
It should be actually something we're known for. First Colossians, we'll talk about that. It says, live wisely among those who are not believers and make the most of every opportunity. Let your conversations be gracious and attractive so that you will have the right response for everyone. And again, it's just that we've talked about, we need to be loving, but we also need the idea we can be wise.
Yeah.
A lot. Sam Chand actually talks about one of the things that had the Israelites, so when we read in the Old Testament, stand out with foreign lands is because of their wisdom, and we see this very similarly in the New Testament. And so what does wisdom look like? It really isn't about knowledge or information. It can definitely encompass that.
Yeah, you need a knowledge base to have wisdom, but it isn't just about knowledge or information, because we all know that guy who gives us the right answer to everything, whether it applies or not. And it isn't always helpful.
No. The idea really is about the ability to apply whatever that is, that information, that knowledge, into some sort of application, again, that's appropriate to the situation.
So true. Because we live in an easy to access information age, it's really important we do not confuse the difference between informational knowledge and wisdom. And wisdom, sure.
There is a difference. So I think just four things to note for me when I was thinking through wisdom is one is, yes, we're saying to be wise, but don't fake an answer.
Yes, and there's a big temptation to do that.
There is.
Yeah.
There is actually great wisdom in knowing our limitations.
Yep.
So we can say, I don't really know what to say to the situation. Or we can answer, but be honest in our limitations.
Yeah.
I think just the idea of like, hey, here are some of my thoughts, but I'll admit my understanding of the subject is minimal.
Yeah, that this is my opinion, not known to be a factual something or other. I think another thing, too, is if we don't know, is how to direct people to someone who might know.
But there's actually wisdom in that. The wisdom of knowing... this person's probably better to help you with whatever situation that might be. I think another thing is just to remember we might be surprised what we contribute. So don't knock yourself. I'm like, I got nothing to say. You might make sure that we are praying. We mentioned James. We are to pray, and he has said he would give us generally. So we might be surprised that even in the little information we have, we might be able to at least offer some sort of nugget that might be surprising. As you even talked about with, like in your situation, I know situations where I've been similar. Sometimes the perspective I've added is not about that being the right perspective, but simply actually helping that person come to a conclusion, and that perspective wasn't the one they grabbed, but it would absolutely help them form something.
Sure.
And you might be surprised.
Yep. And then I think another one is, I think it's helpful to always be a learner.
It really does.
I appreciate this in my own life, being able to read. I like to read the Bible, obviously. I read it every day. But I like to read books on different subjects and not just spiritual things. I've always liked to learn. And now there's so much information available. There's podcasts and courses on YouTube, and you can pay for courses. There's masterclass. There's just so much. There's a lot available to us, and a lot of it is for free that just wasn't available even a decade ago.
And you know what? One maybe last thing to add on this is, we've talked about the importance of listening throughout this series.
Yep.
Listen to people, because you might have interactions with coworkers, friends, all that
Yeah.
sort of stuff, and they might have a little bit of knowledge and wisdom in an area, and you might be surprised that somebody, days, weeks, years
Yeah.
later, sort of says that. You're like, hey, actually, you know what? I knew a person who shared this with me.
Yeah.
Which maybe this is applicable.
Cool.
We might be surprised when that might be helpful.
Actually happened. Now, I really like this next one, to learn people's names.
Really big.
Learning people's names help them feel like they're being seen.
Yeah.
And I know when I first became a pastor, our church was fairly small, like it is now. But at that time, it was growing. And I was the children's pastor at the time. And one of the things I tried to do was learn all the kids' names and all the parents' names, which was easy when there was about 80 people and, about a third of them were kids and parents. So, but as the church grew, it became much harder. But I really made the effort to do it because of this. And I know that it really helped me in being able to relate to parents because they did feel like they were being seen and that their kids were being seen at church. So I know for me, anytime I walk into a room and I know somebody there and they remember my name, it makes me feel good.
Yeah. Well, I just recently, a couple months ago, ran into two different people that I hadn't seen in well over 10 years.
Yeah.
And it was the same thing. One person right away, Jason, it's so great to see you. I haven't seen you forever. And the other person introduced themselves to me. And I'm just like, yeah, we've met.
We know each other.
And there's nothing knocking at that person. Like, it's been a while. It wasn't like we were close or anything like that. In either case, we were close. But I just remember that feeling of like, this made me feel good. This was sort of like, come on, really?
Yeah.
Like, anyway. And to do this, it's really important. We might need to develop some tactics. I know at first I didn't do this because for some reason I thought this wasn't authentic. No. Be intentional as you can. One thing I started using was just when I've learned someone's name, just to kind of repeat it once or twice throughout the conversation you might have with them. Like, and it doesn't have to be like. I know I've definitely seen people where they kind of maybe overdo this a little bit. And maybe that's helpful. That's great. But it's like if you say like, "Hey, my name's Ron," I'm like, "Hey, Ron, nice to meet you."
Yeah.
And then at least before I like, "Well, thank you, Ron, for it was great meeting you again."
Yeah.
Just something like that. I've repeated their name. I've actually done this sometimes. I take time to write them down in my notes app. Just something like that. Just these little things because I definitely am not good naturally at remembering names.
Another technique that I've read about too is to think of a characteristic of that person. So if they're wearing extremely dark glasses or red running shoes or a bow tie,
right,
and you kind of figure that's their thing, that it helps to say their name. It's Ron with the bow tie or Jason with the red shoes.
Oh, okay.
And it's just a way. And then especially if you write that down somewhere, then it just solidifies in your mind because you're involving a different side of your brain. You're making a picture now,
right? And
you're associating a left brain with the right brain, and it does actually make your memory a little stronger to remember the person's name.
And really what's the note on this one is to make sure to learn the names of the people that we don't necessarily need to know.
Yeah.
It can be really easy to focus on those that we've deemed important. And an example is just like, as you at school, you might remember a teacher because obviously you're going to interact with them.
Yeah, every day.
All that sort of, but not necessarily the custodian.
Sure.
You don't necessarily, you walk by them maybe, but you don't necessarily interact with them. So, and that's what I mean by important. Obviously there's more pertinent in the things that are going on in your life. Mm-hmm. Make sure that we are learning the names of those that are not necessarily.
Looking for people on the fringe. Yeah.
Kind of a third thing here is to take interest in other people's lives. And this definitely falls on the heels of learn people's names. Mm-hmm. This is just asking questions about things in people's lives.
Yeah.
Kids, vacations. And again, take notes mentally, physically, whatever.
Yeah. I remember when I was first, when I first graduated from college and I was working in my first, I believe maybe it was my second job. I came across a book by, I think his name was Harvey McKay, and this was his thing. He wrote a whole book about it, about developing he had, I think it was like 50 some questions that you can ask a person. And it wasn't like sit down and interrogate them. It was over the period of several meetings, you try and work these questions into the conversation as a way of showing interest in their lives. But then you have a way to follow up. Now, back then we didn't have phones and databases. He suggested having what's called a Rolodex.
Oh, yeah.
But
Going
once
way
you knew,
back.
if they knew there was a favorite sports team and you could get tickets, those kind of things. If you remember somebody's birthday or their kid's birthday or an anniversary, those kind of things go a long way in just expressing to people that you do actually care about them.
It is absolutely huge. And then you bring it up the next time.
Yeah.
And that's just that. This is just the art of paying attention.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah.
Now, this thing for me in this one, I actually find this naturally easier to remember than remembering names. Like I'm terrible with names.
Yeah.
Even if going back to the
Who are you again?
yeah. Even going back to like some of the techniques I use, like there are still times when I just I've done the technique and the name's gone.
Yep.
I find it easier to remember things about people. So I'll see the face, I'll remember a conversation we have. And so quite often, if we can do both of these, great. If we can do at least one of these, remember the name or remember things about the person, like I will apologize. Like, I know I learned your name. I'm sorry I forgot it. But then I'll bring up just kind of the things we might have talked about last time. Yeah. So I do feel bad about forgetting their names, but I'm hoping I'm communicating. I haven't forgot you.
Yeah.
I just, I remember things about you. It's just the name forever has slipped my mind.
Yeah, and that happens quite a bit, especially if with neighbors you don't see all the time.
Yeah.
So you may have met them once, but then a whole year might go by where, because of winter or whatever, they're just not crossing paths. And I think it's okay to say, you know what? I'm sorry I forgot your name.
It is.
But, and just ask them again.
Yeah.
And reintroduce yourself because they may not remember you either.
Well, yeah. But again, if you if you can sit there, I know I've felt good about this too. When like, oh, I can't remember your name. We were talking about this last time. And like, oh, hey, like this. Yeah. It's such a,
again, it's them feeling like they were heard.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another thing is to be a calm and non-anxious presence. Mm-hmm. So we've talked about wisdom. We've talked about remembering names, remembering things about people, and almost like those things are just like putting the name and the remember about. It's just really about, hey, you matter enough that I've taken the time to remember. Wisdom, and then moving into the calm, anxious present. This really moves really strongly into the chaplain idea.
Yeah.
And this is less about encouraging others to calm down. It's not about that. Like, it's not like be that the president's go there, oh, calm down. That's probably not going to go well. But to actually be the calming presence.
Yeah, and I think if you get to be known for that, then when people are in a trauma situation, they're going to be looking for you.
Yeah, because they know by being with you that hopefully, if their anxiety is at a 10, maybe it'll be a 7.
Sure. Now, this one is probably the hardest one.
I think so.
Because it's not always easy for us to be calm in all situations. So I think this requires sometimes, I know for me, I've had to have counseling for certain things to be able to just be calm myself. And sometimes it takes healing. And this is something that I think with practice you can develop over time.
Yeah, and it's about doing the best we can. If you feel like, oh, I'm not sure how much I can do this, okay, just be as good as you can.
As good as you can.
It's just every day learning to trust God with more that's under our control. And again, it's a journey. Because you're right. Out of all the ones we talk about here, I feel this is the one that could be the trickiest. It's just like you would say, oh man, I don't know if I can be the non-anxious presence. Yeah. Just be we can grow into this role, and it might take some time.
Yeah, and I think the key word there is trusting God. Yeah. Because our nature is to want to be in control.
Yeah.
And so just learning to trust God and let go of control sometimes is really helpful. And I know it has been for me because I like to control everything, if I'm honest. And but it's only when I've learned that I don't have to be in control all the time that I can be less anxious. So little thought there.
Yeah, and I think also to note, it really is about being a person who doesn't feed other people's anxious feelings, and being better at just being the presence that helps people process them.
Yeah.
And so that, again, doesn't mean that you don't have any anxiety yourself. It's just like, but there's a difference between those people that kind of can feed it and those people like who maybe just aren't doing that.
Yeah, I've seen that in situations where someone is feeling anxious and someone tells a story, or in fact, I may have done this last night.
I'm sure we've all done this
in our small
sometimes.
group. Someone brought up a particular situation, and I told a story about something that I think, looking back on it now, probably made them more anxious, and I fed into it rather than projecting calmness about it. So I'm gonna have to go and talk to that person.
Yeah, it's
It's
easy.
Interesting that came up, because you don't always think about it. You think you may be trying to be helpful or trying to be relatable, and you're just feeding into the anxiety.
Yeah, that's why probably a good thing to start to practice is when you want to be a more calm presence for people.
Yeah,
we talked about this I think a couple of videos ago, but just to apply the listening without judgment.
Yep.
So it's like, okay, maybe I'm not going to add anything to this, but I'm going to make sure that I'm just listening and hearing and
showing empathy.
That's
I think that's really something we can't understate here. We want, or overstate. We really need to be the person who is safe, who listens, makes people feel listened to, because people don't always want an answer. They just want to feel heard.
They want to feel heard.
Yeah.
Another thing, when we talk about a chaplain, and we've talked a lot about it's about extending care and spiritual care, we offer to pray.
Mm-hmm.
We want to kind of over time show that our neighbors and friends that we can be a safe place, and this takes time, and this will be demonstrated. But it's the idea that they can share and we can demonstrate we're understanding, and that we allow their emotions to be experienced, and as they feel safe, we then offer to pray. Yeah,
and I've learned to do this more often in the last few years, in that I was always a little reluctant to offer prayer to people, especially people who don't follow Jesus necessarily.
Yeah.
Or even for people who do. If you're in a public place, sometimes it can feel awkward.
Yep, it can.
And but I know that you kind of get to be known as a person who offers prayer sometimes, if you are the person who can do that. And I know there was one person recently in my life where I was offering to pray for them back at home, in my sort of personal prayers for them when I talk to them every day, and the person just kind of closed their eyes and expected me to pray for them right there on the spot, which I did, and so it was kind of a beautiful moment for me, in that this was not something even I was expecting when I was offering prayer, but the person willingly received it. Yeah,
I had a similar situation not that long ago, and there was a group of us, and same thing, like, what can we pray for? And the one individual was just like, can we pray for you? And stuff like that. And like, he was just like, we were barely outside the door of the establishment we were in. So we're like, he was just like, right now. And it was like, oh, hey, we're like right in front of the door. Like, so it's like, I think it's surprising people that if they start to feel a little bit safe, when they really jump at the ability to want to be prayed for.
Yeah, and I think it's a point of connecting them to Jesus as well.
It is. Yeah, it is. Really important as we pray. It's not our way to express our thoughts into conclusions to whatever our neighbor or friends are going to, but really just sort of help them be that connection to Jesus and help connect them to the sacred.
Yeah, I love that.
Which leads us to this important last thing: be Jesus and be your neighbor's connection to the sacred. And just being Jesus is doing what Jesus did. And this is like we talked about being a calm presence, we talked about wisdom, but this is kind of where we can add in other aspects that we find in like fruit of the Spirit, stuff like that. Be patient and gentle and gracious and generous and forgiving and loving. And like in the Gospels, Jesus was how many learned to connect to God.
And a lot of the times it was through hospitality. Like I just was reminded of the story when Jesus called Matthew to be his disciple, and then Matthew threw a party at his house. And when Jesus got there, there were other tax collectors there, and they weren't Jesus' friends. They were Matthew's friends.
They were Matthew's friends, yeah.
But that was a point of connecting them to Jesus.
Yeah.
To the point where Jesus got to be known to be the friend of tax collectors and sinners, and that kind of offended the religious elite of the day.
Yeah. Yeah, and so in that way, like many people we interact with, our neighbors, they may not know how to or think they can connect to Jesus. And as we are Jesus to them, it really, again, it's not about replacing Jesus to them. It's about being Jesus to them is they get to see Jesus through you, and then you help them connect. You are their connection point who, through discipleship, hopefully help them to connect directly.
Yeah. And I think that's an important point you brought up there, is that I would say lots of people who don't follow Jesus don't think they can.
Yeah.
And so then they're looking for someone who does.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good point of first connection.
Yeah. Yeah. So as we wrap this all up, we might be surprised that we can be a place where our friends and neighbors can connect to Jesus. And it's not through some sort of, religious service, or anything like that. It's just in how we interact and are being friends and being a chaplain or caring for those around us.
And again, that involves listening with no judgment, offering insight if you're asked to, and then being honest if you don't have any to give. And then if a person is going through something where it's difficult for them, try and be empathetic, listen to them, and then maybe offer to pray for them.
Yeah, be a safe place.
Yeah. That's what we're talking about today. So I know this talk has been a little different maybe than some of our other ones. It's a little more practical, I guess, and it's maybe not even something we can practice immediately, depending on what sort of state you're in. But I think a lot of it starts with awareness. Yeah. Who are the people in your neighborhood, kind of thing. And then asking God to help you, and then just trying to be aware of these things so that, it's not like they may happen. I guarantee they'll happen. It's just a lot of times we aren't watching for them. So
that's true.
Thank you so much for watching and listening. And please like and subscribe to our channel. And we love bringing this content to you. So we'll see you next time.